the question is, like, doesn't that eat into your operating expense so much that it hurts your cash on cash return, right? It makes the numbers not be as juicy and as good. And my answer is, surprisingly, it doesn't at all. And there's multiple reasons why. One of them being what I hit on earlier is the cost of insurance is 3 times less on a condo or townhome because they have a master service policy. Secondly, there's other costs that typically are intertwined in that HOA. For me, for instance, water was accounted for in the HOA dues themselves. So I get a water and sewer reimbursement from my tenants, which surprisingly is a pretty big number. It's actually like $68 a unit because now I'm covering the water and sewer expense for their utility. So suddenly, and I'll be honest here, these are real numbers. So it's $155 on that OOB unit, the Old Orchard Beach unit. It's $155 as the HOA dues. I immediately get $68 back on reimbursement for utilities on the water and sewer utility that I cover for that tenant, because there's a utility piece to when you're filling out paperwork and what ones are you covering, what ones are you not. Suddenly, I'm also down on insurance by 3x. So compared to a single family home, I think the average insurance cost is $1,400, and my average unit, like I said, is $280. So you do the math on that, I think it's $84 I'm saving. So suddenly I'm already right off the bat. You take 155 minus the 68. Kent, maybe you're good at math here. What does that come to? And then subtract $84 from that. And now what number are we at, guys? Listeners, you're probably at like $15. Suddenly what looked like $155 HOA due is actually only an additional OpEx of $15. But time out, there's more as the infomercials go. What else are you getting with the HOA? I'm getting a team of people, a team of eyes that are like policing my units. I become market agnostic. It doesn't matter where I'm at because I have a team of people policing this. I got security cameras.
Okay, welcome to another episode of Affordable Housing and Real Estate Investing. Today we got Mike Caggiano. Mike's got a very, very interesting affordable housing investment strategy that I can't wait to share with all of you listeners today. Mike is a father of 3. He currently lives in North Carolina, but he invests out of state. So hopefully we can cover a lot of different areas of investing today. But without further ado, Mike, welcome to the show, man. How you doing, dude?
I'm doing really well. Excited to be here, Kent. Definitely want to thank you too for what you've done, what you've created here. It's a great cause. It's needed, right? It's an essential need to help this type of demographic and the families that are in need. And at the same time, some of us unique investors found this as a fun niche to get involved in, and it's kind of a win-win. So I'm doing great, man. Happy to be here.
Dude, I loved it. I'm so glad you showed up, and I'm so glad we met each other online and just started learning about your story. I thought this is the guy I definitely need to bring onto the podcast. So, Mike, just tell us a little about yourself, like your background. Let's start there.
Yeah, for sure. So I just hit the 40 year mark. So I am there now. I have 3 kids, as you mentioned, 2, 6, and 8. I am a full-time dad. I am a full-time executive for a company. I work as a senior leader in HR for a software company. And really, I mean, how the journey began is probably back in the day. So I'm from Maine originally, should mention that, and grew up in many different sports. Found myself to be pretty good, above average in baseball, and so I went and played collegiately and at a university at Maine, and met some good buddies, some good friends. And then at some point I realized baseball is not going to be my calling, and started thinking differently, right? Took some schooling more serious, did an internship. That got me into finance. My major was business with a concentration in finance. So I took a job at a company called MBA America, an internship. It was kind of eye-opening to me, right? That was my first exposure to like really seeing debt. And in particular, I was a credit analyst. So I was seeing these credit cards, these balance transfers, and I had upsells and things like that I could do, and really saw what debt could do to people, right? And the stresses, and we would call them. I would get involved in collections and things like that. So fast forward a little bit, I ended up doing that internship for a semester, turned into a job actually, my senior year. They said, why don't you just come on full time? And, I said, well, I can't because I'm still a student. And they're like, well, work evenings and part-time if you want. And so I did. So I moved on and took that job. And then fast forward a little more, found myself with a colleague that joined the company as well, starting a job at a mortgage company. And he said, Mike, come join, man. You're going to love it here. And this, guys, to put this in perspective too, this is pre-2008 crash. So these were exciting times in the mortgage industry for sure. And I had good buddies. Dane, I think you mentioned you're an athlete yourself. These guys know how to have a good time. So we were slinging up no doc ninja loans. You guys probably heard of some of these terminologies. And, magic marker loans where you're crossing things out if they have a 620 FICO or better. And I started understanding the financial pieces of what you want from an investor's perspective, but I still wasn't executing on it. Now I'm only a year out of college. I ended up buying my first unit, 6 months out of college after I took that full-time job at the mortgage company, kind of practicing what I was preaching. And that was my first flavor. So, kind of fast forwarding even more now. So now I'm an owner. Now I'm kind of a landlord as well. And my roommate's paying $700 a month. I'm paying $150 a month for my housing. So I'm having a good time here. I'm making good money in the mortgage industry. I'm a landlord, right? So this was all happening, and I'm not realizing, that I'm getting more and more into this though. And then, fast forward quicker now. Now I'm moving out of Maine, and we elected to pick a state, pick the best spot that we want based on economy, based on jobs, and it landed me in Raleigh, North Carolina. And that was about 13 years ago now. So when I moved out, I rented it out to a private market. And I'll pause here, but that was my first, I moved out. Whatever I could fit in my car, guys, was what I took. Whatever I couldn't was what the new renters owned, which was including of silverware, bedding, a couch, all that stuff. Yeah. And so we moved out, and then we were, that put me in North Carolina, and, and that's where the story kind of began, I guess.
I was going to say, I can sniff some affordable housing stories here in North Carolina. Is that where you got started? Is that how you got started? What triggered your interest in affordable housing? Because it sounds like that first property was not obviously Section 8 affordable housing. It was your typical A class, B class ish. Yeah. As long as you guys didn't beat it up too much with empty beer cans and pizza boxes and stuff like that.
Yeah, everything was fixable, what we did. So, but yeah, so what happened, Dane, what we did and what I ended up doing here was renting it out to some private market. It was actually a couple young college girls, and I met with their father, and, we signed the lease and we did all that stuff. And 2 months into it, I was having like some serious issues. So, and I should say, yeah, this is about I call it a class A minus property. There's a little bit of room for improvement, but super safe area, Old Orchard Beach, Maine, really fun, mile from the beach. And they were definitely having a good time. And I was having some issues with my neighbors, and they were not happy with what was going on. And I experienced my first eviction actually just 3 months after I became a landlord. And any listeners out there that are getting involved or already kind of involved in landlording, that's probably your worst nightmare, right? This is like worst case scenario is pretty much what ended up happening to me. Is they were actually doing some drugs. I had police involved, and I had to do like the official writ eviction process, 3 months into being a landlord. And I'm doing it from 825 miles away. Nervous. I got a friend there, like looking over it, kinda. And to then lead up to that. So once that happened, which was an experience in itself, one that I did document down, in a Word doc to make sure I followed the process again, should I need it. I'm guessing, hey, I'm only 3 months into this. I think I'm going to do this for the next 30 years. I better start documenting things because I'm already learning a lot. And I found absolutely backwards, like did not realize I was going to get into Section 8 housing at all. And she reached out to me. So I advertised my unit after I evicted them. Advertised my unit on Craigslist. And guys, I mean, I'm old, right? I'm old and wise now. This predates Facebook being anything of advertising, of use. I think Facebook was only created 2 years prior to this time frame we're in my life. So I was on Craigslist, guys. Yeah, many listeners may not even know what Craigslist is. Yeah, that's where I advertised. And this was before like affordablehousing.com and these other Section 8 Go .com sites and things like that. And I happened to get so lucky. I found the sweetest, but yet vulnerable sounding applicant. And she reached out to me, and I just felt like, man, I need to help this person. It was a weird scenario, right? Because I'm in dire straits from a financial perspective because I'm a young guy here, and I'm like, I can't have this unit vacant. But geez, I couldn't disregard the genuine, like, I don't know, she was just super vulnerable. And I'm like, she has a young kid. And I'm like, you know what, Lauren, we'll call her LM. So LM initials. You know what, LM, let me see what I can do. Can you send me what you're talking about for paperwork? So I read through that. She had a contract, she had a voucher. I didn't know what this voucher was. I'm going through that. There's things that I'm supposed to review and sign. And I just took my gut. I went with a gut instinct on that, and I followed through and began the process of the paperwork, as you guys know, and the approval process, the home inspection process. And I was going through it just as naive as any investor. I had no tools that I've, managed to implement and create and refine over the years. And I got really lucky with her. And she moved in, and guys, get this, she's still a tenant of mine. She's still in that unit. She sends me a Christmas gift every year. It's crazy. She's still my tenant though. And now her son, who at the time, I think he was only like 7 years old, now is a dad himself. Right. It's crazy, but he's still my tenant 16 and a half years later.
That's an awesome story, dude. I love that. That is really cool. And I think sometimes the best education, just go back a little bit, is you're doing your due diligence, but sometimes you have to go with your gut and then jump in and pay a little bit of tuition, but kind of learn as you go. So that's awesome. That worked out. That's great.
Yeah. I mean, I got really lucky, I feel like, in that scenario, because I didn't have any of the application process and my screening methods that I leverage now. And I just kind of went with my gut on that. And I do have that in my application process now. Is there's a feel factor, but that's only 10%. And my feel factor then was about 80% of what I was leveraging, because I still had a general application, but I was just doing the very basics at that point. So I definitely got lucky.
Sure.
But over the course of the years, I mean, I've been doing Section 8 now for 16 years now. Since she was my first one, she's still my tenant. And and I've done third party, private, and I've done executive rentals. And the only 2 evictions I have ever done is an executive rental one and my very first one of the story I just explained prior to my Section 8 tenant. I've done 2 evictions though, and none of them are Section 8.
I love that. So I love it when people bust myths that sometimes Section 8 tenants are the worst tenants, right? And you're kind of a living, walking example of that. And maybe this is a good time. Like, you have a wealth of experience, Mike, 16 years, 17 years of investing in real estate. You've done evictions. So you kind of been through the ring of fire, so to speak. I mean, what really caught my attention was that you told me you actually invest in a lot in like condos and HOAs. And this is a very interesting strategy. You typically only hear about single family homes, multifamily. We don't hear about condos or HOAs type of properties that often. Can you just share with us why you decided to invest in that type of asset class? And then maybe I can ask about the pros and cons afterwards. But just tell us, like, how did you even stumble upon that? Or did you make a active, conscious decision to go invest in that type of asset?
Yeah, sure, Ken. Yeah. I would say it likely goes against the grain of many, books and things that you read about. And, many are about multifamily. Many are about, it's a numbers game, get 30 units under one roof. That's the way to go. Now, I'm not saying you can't do that in a garden style condo complex. Of course you can, right? Because these are 18 to 20 units per building. And that's kind of what I'm doing now, right? I'm picking them off one by one though, rather than one loan and getting 20. But I ended up, so I've had experience in both. So my first unit was a condo. I bought it as a college, recent college grad, and I still own that unit. And then in the meantime, though, I had picked up 2 different single family units. So I started experiencing some things that I just was like, wow, I didn't even think about this. Like, the numbers were great. And I should note too, to everybody, most of my units I've managed from 825, 850 miles away. So, and I don't have a property management company. So my model, was kind of created in reverse engineering style. where I didn't go into it purposely looking for just condos and townhomes. I found from my experience, though, a single family home, we could start, essentially just from the outside, right? And these are things that I had to maintain. So you driveways, sidewalks, grass, trees, shrubbery, doorbells, fences, awnings, outdoor spigots, outlets. I haven't even mentioned roof, siding, windows. The list goes on and on. Some people have sewer problems, septic problems, grading issues, sloping issues, and I'm still on the outside, guys, right? So I mean, you have outdoor screens, sliding doors. These are things that I had experienced, though, as an investor with my single family homes, because especially my executive rental, that house was super nice. I mean, it's now valued at like $850,000. That house, though, gave me more headaches. And granted, the appreciation was good and the numbers were fantastic, of course. But when you peel the onion back a little bit and you start realizing, wait a minute, though, I have a job, I want to have a family, and how much is my time worth? Point? Because although you could have a property management company, which I did have actually with that single family home, they were calling me all the time. The property management company, they're like, "Hey, Mike, we got another issue." I literally had my water main break. The landscaper accidentally somehow hit the line. He was out there aerating. And I'm like, how is this even possible? But either way, it happened. So I'm like shutting off the water. I'm dealing with that with my tenant. Windows broke from a tree branch that hit it one time. It's like, but those are things on the outside of the building, guys, right? That's a long-winded answer, but that's what a single family home consists of on the outside. We haven't even gotten inside yet. And the numbers that, why the numbers don't work on the inside either, or why a townhome and a condo is more appealing on the inside. But I'll stop there, Kent. Yeah. So that's, on the outside alone, that's the things that you don't experience with a condo or townhome. I don't have any of those items. None of them that I listed off.
I could just imagine a listener going back now and pressing rewind. Is like, okay, here's all the different problems that's going to come up from a single family home. Because this is like, Dane and I talked about this before. Dane is like, the economies of scale doesn't make sense for a single family home. That's why Dane went right into the multifamily side. So this is interesting. That you listed all these issues on the outside. All right, you just scared everybody away from investing in single family home. Tell us about the pros.
I missed a few critical ones too that have happened. My gutters clogged and broke and hit a window. I forgot about that. I'm like thinking back here. My gutters, there's just a bunch. I had fencing issues with the dog. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to get rid of this situation.
But tell us more of the pros then. What are the pros? Is it just the exact opposite of everything you just talked about? Like, tell us the pros of why you would invest in an HOA property like a condo or a townhome.
Oh, the pros of an HOA, sure. So those are the negatives of a single family on the outside. We could talk about inside too, but I'll talk about the pros of a condo and a townhome, which you could think of the opposite for a single family. So the pros of the condos and the townhomes, you don't have any of the stuff I just listed. So there's no outside issues really whatsoever to worry about. You have lawn care, you have siding, you have windows, you have roof, all taken care of. There's something called an MSA, Master Service Insurance Agreement, that usually covers a lot of the stuff, if not almost everything that you can encounter from an insurance claim. Now you do get small, then you get the condos insurance, which is substantially less, guys. It is 3 to 4 times less. Go ahead and quote me on that, guys, because I will beg to differ if you have a different number. But I've done these. I've had single family, like I said, I have a lot of condos and I have townhomes, and it is 3 to 4 times less in insurance. My insurance for my condos on average is like $280 a year. It's a year. So anyway, because my master service policy. Wow. So you do have an HOA cost, right? You could say, oh, but you're paying your HOA dues. Well, sure, but those are offsetting certain things, though. Like, keep in mind, I mean, the HOA is offsetting all those big ticket costs that you would have for repairs. And then on top of that, you go inside a condo in a townhome. The typical, now Google this, guys. I mean, I have the typical size of a townhome condo. We'll just stick with a garden style condo. I have 5 or 6 of those. Is 882 square feet. That's nationwide average. The average size right now of a single family detached dwelling is 2301, 2,301. Why does that matter? You could say, but Mike, you have a cost per square foot or, rent per square foot. Well, guys, we're talking affordable housing. Let's remember, it's all about beds and heads. It is not about the size and the amenities that is being offered. It doesn't mean that you don't offer high quality. It just means you don't need all the ancillary things, which includes hallways, fancy hallways, high ceilings, cathedral ceilings, extra windows, extra, ceiling fans, garbage disposals, You know, these are things that you get in typically in a single family, exterior outlets, decking, side, you know, all these things. You don't have to worry about that in a condo, and you get a lot less square footage, you know, almost 3 times the size as a single family. And you get this same amount in rent, guys. So if you keep a high quality product with, you know, good, and I'm all about good counters, good kitchen, good supplies, you know, good quality items, good flooring. LVP flooring is wonderful, lasts a long time. It's more durable than carpet. And I do that to all my units. I really high quality units before the tenants move in. And so that helps me immensely. And I still get the same amount in rents. And I don't have a lot of investor competition. I'll be honest, guys. I don't get into back and forth like I did with single families. A lot of investors don't care to even look at a condo or townhome. So I'm not typically in competition with these, you know, it's usually just third party, you know, young couples, right, trying to buy that I'm kind of up against. So I can easily, I'm sorry, but I could outbid them any day of the week, right? I could do an all cash deal. They're not ready for that. They're probably doing an FHA loan. So it's a lot easier too from a competition perspective as well.
Now, I'm sorry, go ahead. No, keep going. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. My last point here too is, you know, before there's probably more, but is the HOA itself. That is self-policing, guys. So the HOA bylaws, the covenants are fantastic ways to have eyes and ears and neighbors watching over your property. And if you have a good screening and you have a good application process, you're not going to have a problem because you're going to get good people in there anyway. And you set the tone by really having a high quality product that you're giving them when they move in, right? And so the HOA bylaws, you want to read the covenants fine tooth. You know, you really want to look through them though. You want to make sure that there's no, you know, things that prohibit you being able to rent it out or you being able to have a specific tenant in there with a certain credit score. There's places in Florida I know that do have some criteria in there. You know, there is the Affordable Care Act itself that protects from discrimination against these folks. However, there's of course loopholes because typically affordable housing tenants, housing choice voucher tenants have low credit scores, have low income. Now HOAs have, you know, maybe learned that and they have criteria there. But as long as you read through it all before you buy, make sure it's looking good. And we have criteria that you can look at in my training, you're good to go and you can buy it. And then you kind of set it and forget it for the most part because the neighbors, I have a few good neighbors, you know, Dane, you being in multi-units, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, where you have a few neighbors that are eyes and ears for you that'll reach out to me. I know a guy that lives right across the hall from 3 of my units and he's a great guy and he'll reach out to me. In fact, he's going to sell his to me and hopefully, you know, shout out to him if he listens at some point, but I love you, man. I want your unit. But yeah, he's eyes and ears. Yeah, he's eyes and ears. And then there's a sense of community. There's a real sense of community, guys, too, that it actually is what was eye-opening to me to realize they start meeting their neighbors in these hallways. They're not nervous. My tenants aren't nervous. And we'll be honest here, right? Most of my housing choice vouchers are young single moms. They're vulnerable. They need a safe, sound place that's secure. I have security cameras there. We have a secured front door. You have to punch in a code before you even get to the hallway of which your unit is in. They love that stuff. And I don't blame them. I love it for them. If it was my daughter, I would be happy and feel safe and sleep well if I knew she was in one of my units there. This is a very safe, sound place too. So it's really nice too when you walk in there. So it's like all these good things that a lot of investors shy away from. They're like, we hate HOAs. It kills the ROI, the you know, operating expenses as well. They look at these numbers and it's like, well, time out, guys. Like, is it really? Are we sure? Because I'm not experiencing that, and I experience both with the single families. So yeah, those are some of the reasons.
Yeah, and I'll ask you to do a deep dive if you don't mind here in a second. But that you kind of answered my question. Is Jared and I are always open to, you know, anything, you know, and so we have looked at.
And Jared Dane is somebody you know.
I'm sorry, Jared's my brother and my partner with Aspen.
Oh, okay, cool, yeah.
So he's in Colorado. I'm here in Ohio, and we're primarily here in Columbus, Ohio area. And so we have actually looked at a handful of different condo deals also. But yeah, to your point, like when we were underwriting it, it was the HOA fee that always seemed to kill the deal for us. Do you have any tips or advice on that? Obviously, we went back, and we never try to bully a seller or be hyper emotional. It's a transaction. It's a numbers game, as we've talked about in all these other podcasts. And we just showed them, look, this doesn't pencil. Excuse me, this doesn't pencil. and it would have to be a price reduction type of deal. So number one, any advice on that? Number two, and you kind of already had, answered this, you kind of look at the HOA as an ally, and we were always a little concerned, like, oof, okay, well, what if they want to raise rate the dues, or what if they want to do a massive capital outlay that we don't really necessarily want, and that's going to reduce the operating accounts and potentially force some strain. I guess it was kind of us not knowing enough. Maybe I wish we would have known you 3 years ago because you absolutely know your stuff. But yeah, I guess, how do you answer those? And then we'll talk about a deep dive maybe.
Yeah, sure, Dane. Yeah, and that's cool, man. That's awesome. You work with your brother. I don't think my brother and I that would work out. So I commend you there. That's awesome.
We'll see how it goes. We're only 4 years in. We'll give it some more time.
Hey, man, that's good. Well done. 4 years is pretty good anyway. But that's awesome. But yeah, good question for sure, right? And that's like the normal reaction to an investor too that I get. Like, I'll be at so I have 3 kids, 2, 6, and 8, and I'll be at one of their events or something like that, and I'll talk to a parent, and those are some of the things. They're like, wait, condos, what are you talking about? How does that work? I don't think that works, Mike. It's like, oh, all right, you teach me, right? It's like but those are the common thoughts, and for sure. So I look at the HOA, and I will say this, Dane, you're probably looking at it from buying the entire building, but I'm going to approach this answer from the perspective of the general listener here that's looking to get their hands dirty into real estate investing, and you're looking to buy 1 or 2 units in the next 6 to 12, 18 months or so. I'm going to look at it from that angle and not the totality of the building itself. But
and that's actually great, because we were only looking at buying, it was like a 400 or 500 unit complex, and we were going to end up with like 40 of those units. So kind of a smaller scale like that. Yeah.
Yeah, still big, but that's awesome. Yeah, that's really exciting for sure. And it's never too late. You can go back after this call and make a call maybe over there.
Maybe I will. Maybe I'll have you call them for me.
Hey, you never know. And I could plug the numbers in for sure. I have a pretty good analyzer tool and a forecaster tool as well. We're pretty good with the numbers, but I'll say this. So, so the question being, just to recap, is, how do you offset the cost of the HOA? Because the HOA fees, sometimes they vary, of course. Anywhere, my units range from, maybe, I'm trying to think, like my lowest one is like 125 and all the way up to and that's $125 a month, all the way up to $236 a month down here. Now, the question is, like, doesn't that eat into your operating expense so much that it hurts your cash on cash return, right? It makes the numbers not be as juicy and as good. And my answer is, surprisingly, it doesn't at all. And there's multiple reasons why. One of them being what I hit on earlier is the cost of insurance is 3 times less on a condo or townhome because they have a master service policy. Secondly, there's other costs that typically are intertwined in that HOA. For me, for instance, water was accounted for in the HOA dues themselves. So I get a water and sewer reimbursement from my tenants, which surprisingly is a pretty big number. It's actually like $68 a unit because now I'm covering the water and sewer expense for their utility. So suddenly, and I'll be honest here, these are real numbers. So it's $155 on that OOB unit, the Old Orchard Beach unit. It's $155 as the HOA dues. I immediately get $68 back on reimbursement for utilities on the water and sewer utility that I cover for that tenant, because there's a utility piece to when you're filling out paperwork and what ones are you covering, what ones are you not. Suddenly, I'm also down on insurance by 3x. So compared to a single family home, I think the average insurance cost is $1,400, and my average unit, like I said, is $280. So you do the math on that, I think it's $84 I'm saving. So suddenly I'm already right off the bat. You take 155 minus the 68. Kent, maybe you're good at math here. What does that come to? And then subtract $84 from that. And now what number are we at, guys? Listeners, you're probably at like $15. Suddenly what looked like $155 HOA due is actually only an additional OPEX of $15. But time out, there's more, as the infomercials go. what else are you getting with the HOA? I'm getting a team of people, a team of eyes that are like policing my units. I become market agnostic. It doesn't matter where I'm at because I have a team of people policing this. I got security cameras. It mitigates for cost, but yeah, that's
cool.
probably it in a nutshell, Dane. Like when you look at it that way.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's gold, really. I mean, and I know, and again, this is probably at least 2 to 3 years ago. So I don't remember all the specifics, but maybe I will go back and revisit that and just kind of look at it and see if we could have maybe made that deal work. One more question about the HOA, and again, we haven't looked at a condo in a while. As an owner of X amount of units, just for round numbers, let's say there's 100 units in that complex and you own 2. Are there voting rights and things like that with HOAs where you guys all vote on, do we want to replace roofs? And do you only get 2% of the say, or how does that, what does that look like? I can't remember the specifics on that.
Yeah. Well, and good question, Dane. And from my learnings is it's not a one size fits all answer either. The covenants and the bylaws aren't all the same for different complexes, even within the same state. And now I've run into that because I own in different towns in Maine, and they have different HOA bylaws and covenants and restrictions. But in the one particular one where I have 5 units, it does. If you own 2/3, then you have a 66% voting power. And also, though, one of the questions that a lot of realtors will ask when you're going through the financing is what's the rent to own ratio? Now, interesting enough, not always does that even matter within the HOAs, though. So sometimes not only for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and conforming loans does that matter, it oftentimes matters within the complex itself. The complex says, hey, we want to police this. We don't want one owner owning 2/3 of this compound. Turns out not all rules and bylaws are the same, because in my particular complex, there's no restriction. I checked on that. I said, guys, is there a problem here if I buy 10 units here? They said, no, there's no restriction. I said, just to confirm, and I sent it in an email, I can own every single, I would literally said this date. I'm like, I can own every single unit in this complex, and you guys, there's no restrictions that exist at this current moment in time. And they said, absolutely not. I said, okay, good to know. I was like, got it in writing.
That's another great point too, because we've run into that in the past also, where I can't remember, some of them would only, if this sounds right, only allow non-residents to own X% of the units, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. And one of the things you'll run into, and for the listeners, with conforming conventional Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loans, is it's usually a 50% ratio. As soon as a complex goes beyond 50%, and what I mean is the rent versus owner occupied. Once there's more renters in a complex by 1%, so 51%, you can't get a normal Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loan. Now, that is something to consider, but I'm a long-term hold guy, meaning it's something to consider if you go and try to sell. Say you do own 75% of a complex, and now you want to sell it, and you want to sell them as individual. You're not selling it to a big-time investor. You're selling them one by one. Well, suddenly remember now, it's likely that the buyers are not going to be able to do conventional conforming Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. That's your usual FHA loans. It's usual bank loans, Bank of America loans. You can't get that. They won't allow that. It's restricted from a lending practice, best practice, because they're concerned that their collateral is too risky at that point. There's too many investors in here. We don't know. The investors can hit the road and say, we're out of here.
Yeah. And thanks for bringing that up. That I'm having flashbacks to, like I said, 3 years ago. And even the first property my wife and I ever owned was a little condo in a condo community. And that's where I first had heard that owner occupancy level. And they were excited to have us because we were going to be in there, obviously owning and living. So awesome.
Nice.
Do you mind doing a deal, like a deep dive on some of your deals, and maybe comparing any differences and or similarities between condos versus multifamily versus single family, like you have been? This has been awesome.
I'm thinking, for the sake of a listener who probably doesn't have a visual, I should just say it out loud rather than, So let me think of the last deal I purchased, So I got a little slow. So I stopped in last May. So May 2022 was the last deal I bought, which I got lucky in a sense because it was most of my units recently have been off market deals. And I say I got lucky in a sense because what it caused me to do was pull a lot of my money out of my brokerage account. So always making moves on the stock side as well, because you don't want your down payment money to just be sitting stagnant with an inflationary world that we're in. So I kept it in a brokerage account, and I started pulling it out because I bought actually 4 units, pretty recent time frame. So back in May 2022, I purchased another condo in that complex, and it was $170,000, praised at $210,000. Don't tell the seller, but I was happy about that. But we did it as a FSBO, for sale by owner, guys. So definitely get creative too. I always recommend this too in my training as well. Always try to buy off-market deals. And what is an off-market deal? It's one that you just see you like and you start sending them emails. Find out who the owner is. Go to your government site. Find out who owns it and send them, and Google them and find out what their LinkedIn is as well. I've done this. Yes, guys, you can do this. It's perfectly legal. But off-market deals are the way to go. You're going to get a better deal. So listeners are like, hey, let me look this up. How do you get this for $170,000? You will see in the history of it, though, I bought it for $170,000. It's a 1988 garden style condo. I got it for $170,000. And maybe that sounds like a lot because it's also a 2-bedroom. But the thing that you want to look at, and something that my analyzer tool can do, is you plug in, it's actually interactive. You just push where on a geographic map, and it's going to tell you all the way down to the county level. So you can start at a state level, and it's a heat map basically telling you what the FMR, guys. So fair market rent rates, that's established. I think it goes back to from like 1974, when what happened was the government said, hey, we need private owners like me, like you guys, the listeners, to start purchasing and participating in the housing choice voucher landlord program, because the government was so swamped, right? Inundated, shortage of housing. So anyway, the FMR is what's critical too. So you want it when you're analyzing these deals. So I'm able to look at that, and I already knew because I have units there. So the FMR on that particular unit was $1,755. So $1,755, guys, for $170,000 unit. Now you're like, hey, does that pass the 1% rent to value?
Wow. There you go. Yeah. I love it.
It was a good deal, right? So it passes the 1% rent to value ratio that a lot of listeners, and that, guys, has only been a craze probably for the past 10 years. But I can remember rent to value was never really looked at. I'm old, but that's just something that really worked. But we got to be prepared for that to dip down. The 1% rule might not be as attainable with higher interest rates and prices being as high as they were. They're still coming down, but they inflated really fast. Historically, there's never been a time like that, 20% per year the past 2.5 years. But anyway, so back to my deal. So it was 170. I get 1755. I do have an HOA of 155. And I got a rate, though, of 4.875 because that was in May. I rate locked, though, in April. A 90-day rate lock in April. I watched the rates soar. I actually think I got it in late March. So I got it at 4.875. You guys have your mortgage calculators out there. You can put it in. 4.875. I put 20% down on a 30-year fixed term. And I'm thinking here, I got $3,000 in seller concession as well on top of that, guys, because it was a FSBO, which was unheard of, right? Seller concession left everybody's vocabulary for the past 2.5 years.
Right.
My buddy's like, what the hell? I was like, yeah, man, I gotta ask. I asked. I got that was the max, right? 2% was the max you can get back. So it wasn't quite 3,000, but yeah. So all in. And taxes are 1647. So you plug all that in, guys, and you'll have the numbers. And I think I net $700 a month after all expenses. So I'm netting $700 a month. I think my cash on cash return was 21%. I am going off memory. I can plug it in, but I don't want it. Like I said, it's not a visual, so I'm not gonna. But yeah, it's like somewhere around. I was making 21% cash on cash return on that deal, and that was in 2022, right? Like pretty much historically, when we look back, you're gonna say that was probably the worst year to buy. Don't buy in 2022. It was like the peak, and rates went up, and your values were almost the highest they could be. It was almost like the worst time. It's almost like buying in 2005, which is when I bought my first condo in that complex. So both eras, I bought in 2005 and I bought in 2022 in that same complex. And guess what? My one in 2005, my tenant's still there. The one in 2005 is paid off. It's a cash cow, absolutely bringing me in $1,700 a month profit, net profit, because it's paid off. But But yeah, so there's a unit right there. So deep dive on that one. So those are the numbers, and I bring in about 700 a month on that.
Well, let me jump in here then, Mike, because we talked about all the benefits of buying a property in an HOA area, where the HOA lowers some of your insurance costs, but also your maintenance fees, right? So what are you setting aside for maintenance or CapEx for your properties just because you have an HOA fee? Like, give us some tactical examples of what are you using for your assumptions for maintenance and CapEx and how you underwrite these deals.
Yeah, great question, Kent. So first off, guys, I recommend all listeners use yourselves. I'm sure you guys love Microsoft Excel. So I live in Microsoft Excel. So I can actually say it's not an assumption. It's actually historical records have proven to me my exact dollar amount. I track every single expense on every single unit. My accountant loves that. It helps in many different ways. So my average expense, I've come down to, it's about 5% of rents. So 5% of rent. So that's different than, some people go off value. Some people call it like 1% of value. I've found it to be roughly 5% of rent. So what does that come to? It's called about $90 a month. So I put that in my forecaster. That's in that 21% cash on cash return. Yeah. I put vacancy in there as well. I just do that for a cushion. I have zero vacancy, everybody. Zero. Yeah. Like literally. You will not have vacancy if you follow the program and you effectively have an application, have a screening process. You could follow my model if you want. We'll talk more about that. But I have zero vacancy. Repeat, zero. I can't tell you enough. I usually have a tenant move in the day after my tenant moves out. And I don't have a tenant move out on average 7.8 years. And the only reason I only had 2 tenants move out, man. The other ones that moved out is because I sold my complex. I sold my single family. So they've moved out. I had, and I don't have a lot of units, guys. I'm not going to lie. I have 8 units. I at one point had 11 units. But I'm happy. I'm content. And the numbers work. And I put maybe 3 hours a month into real estate. Maybe 3 hours a month on all these units. And that comes because I have my HOA, because I have my systematic way. But yeah, that's what I'd say. I know, Ken. I put in a 5% factor for those expenses, for maintenance expenses, and I also account for the vacancy. But the vacancy is 0, but I still put 2 weeks of vacancy on every unit.
So, Mike, one of our goals. So go ahead, Dan.
I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, Mike, that's a quarter of what we set aside per unit for CapEx in multifamily. Roughly. I didn't know there was going to be this much math on today's podcast.
Me neither. I didn't know either.
I probably would have called in sick. So no, but that's tremendous. I'm loving all of the information that you're giving us here for sure. It just shows how lean. And I knew, just to kind of go back to 3 years ago, I knew that would be a hell of a lot easier to manage a condo versus, a multifamily complex or a single family home. But I didn't know just how crisp and clean. And kudos to you, dude. Like, your numbers. And we talk about this all the time. If you don't know your numbers, you got to get out. And those numbers inside and out, and you've got it down to an art. So yeah, good for you.
Yeah. No, yeah. And I know my numbers well enough to realize I'm kicking myself that I don't own more units, right? But I don't kick it myself too hard because I have a real good lifestyle, life of leisure. And, I still have a corporate job because at some point, Dane, and it sounds like you are a working man as well as an investor. At some point, though, you're going to get to a point where it just is not manageable. It's not fun to have both going. And I'm approaching that moment, but it's not until, and I love my job. I love my people. I love what I do. I've been doing it 10 years, but at some point you got to step back and say, hey, I got to bow out of that because I know real estate is a deep, deep passion, right? I love the intrinsic values that you get out of helping Section 8 holders too, because I don't have a problem with any of my tenants. And if anything, I get gifts that surprise the heck out of me. I got a gift from one of my new tenants and I'm like, I don't even know who this is from. And I had to ask a couple tenants and they're like, oh my God, you got the chocolates. I was like, oh, is that from you? Oh, thank you so much. I didn't get that from private market. Private market. The only time I heard from them, I dreaded those phone calls. I'm like, oh gosh, what are they going to tell me about now? But yeah, Dane, I kudos to you, man. If you're able to juggle both, because it is not easy, but it is easy with this model, but also this model is way easier to manage because I don't have a lot of units. I'm not biting off too much, guys. And that's the key thing for listeners to understand. You don't have to quit your day job. You don't have to, stop everything you're doing in your life of leisure to worry about losing sleep, to worry about these big ticket items. I go back to why condos and townhomes are fantastic, because I don't have nightmares. I had those nightmares. Like I said, I had 3 different single family units, and holy cow, they never ceased to amaze me. I had crawl space issues. I'm like, what the hell's a crawl space anyway? What's going on here? Like, a crawl space barrier? What are you talking about? I have to have a barrier? And I didn't even know what it was about, so I'm down there in there. I'm looking in the crawl space. I'm like, this is crazy. I'm like getting paid good money, and I'm driving over there and I'm going into a crawl space. Like, this doesn't happen in condos and townhomes, man. Like, there's so many different unique things in, that townhomes and condos, but also this model fosters for lifestyle.
Well, Kent and I were both smiling when you mentioned that I'm also a working man, because I don't know how many days, I don't have the countdown timer on yet like my business partner does, but in 3 weeks, I will no longer be, I'll be unemployed. I'm selling my medical practice, and I'm looking to partner with good people that know systems and have, have growth potential. And the whole time I'm listening to you, I'm like, oh, this is good.
Well, congrats, Dane. That's amazing. It's got to be an insane feeling, right? Like, that's what I'm like, man, I'm like, I don't know when I'm going to do it, because I keep getting pulled back into the corporate world. And like I said, I love it. I love the people. I think they love me for the most part. But that's awesome, because like, I can only imagine when you don't have to look at your phone, you don't have to look at your emails, and you're like, your true passion, it sounds like, is investing, is real estate, is helping people. And I know that's my calling as well. And it's like, I'm just not there yet. I have 3 young kids, and I got to keep that W-2 income too, is also helping me stay good with my financing with my Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So you got to look at it that way too for me.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's awesome, Dane. Kudos, man. That's insane. That's congratulations.
You can tell Dane and I are just waiting on the silence. Like, hey, when your neighbor sells that other unit across the hallway, we're like, let us partner with you, man. Come on. Clearly, you found the gem. You found a diamond in the rough there.
There's a lot of
Mike,
them.
What's so cool, and this is why we love bringing on different guests onto this podcast, is like, everyone can succeed either in the big multifamily like Dane, developers like Alvin, and also you could just have 8 units like Mike and be tremendously successful. And I want people to feel inspired by this, because like, you don't need 1,000 units to live the life that you want and to be able to spend the time with your kids that you're probably looking for. You don't need to rush into and dive into and quit your job right away, like you said, Mike. And I think that's so beautiful. Maybe if we were to try to make it more realistic for people, like, what are you making like per month on cash flow basis across your 8 properties? Like, what does that look like for you right now from a cash flow perspective?
Yeah, great question, Ken. Yeah, I'm happy to, for full disclosure, right? So I make about $6,800 right now, and I have projections of rent increases because the FMR numbers are there, and I have a whole systematic way there. I'll be nearing $8,000 a month in profit. I collect just about around $15,000 a month in rents. So I'll be, bringing in pretty good income, right? Like, I mean, we're talking almost 6 figures at this point of income. That's after all expenses. So yeah, those are my numbers. And I just want people always growing, guys. What's crazy, Ken, is I did the numbers this year. So what's a fun thing to do? And Dane, I do love my spreadsheets. So I know these numbers because of the spreadsheets, but and I'm not looking at them, but I increased rents across the board out of all my units by, I think it ended up being 14%. I kid you not. It's 14%, guys. And understand this too. And I listen to some podcasts, and Ken, heck, I listen to yours sometimes, and it's fun. It's fun. I shouldn't say, heck, I even listen to yours. Yours is a good podcast. It's affordable housing, right? But some of the numbers that I hear and stuff, I'm just like, this doesn't seem right. But understand this: when I increase my rents and when I write my leases for my tenants, it's written in there, your rent will go up every single year to the max FMR rate. They sign it without hesitation because I've educated them. Their rent rate has nothing to do with what they're going to pay in rent. It's 30% of their adjusted household income. 30% of their adjusted household income. It's not 30% of the rent. So I go to the max every single year for 16 years. I go to the very max. That's a fact. Whenever I increase my single family units, my executive rental and my non-executive rental, my just third party private market ones, it is an arduous, horrendous experience for me as a landlord. I go through so much pain and agony. How are you doing this to me, Mike? What are you doing for my unit? Are you going to finally redo the kitchen? Are you going to get me that new washer and dryer? It's like, wait, I have all sorts of different expenses, guys, going up. Like, I'm only going up like $100. I'm going up like 4% on my single families. And I'm telling you right now, so my FMR and all I own now, guys, are Section 8. So when I say these numbers, has nothing to do with third party and executive rentals. I average increase by 14%, but my take home increase. So there's a difference, right? When you look at the numbers, that's not my take. My average increase in take home was 30% this year. When I get done increasing my rents and my take home becomes around $8,000 a month of profit, it'll be a 30% change in 1 year. It's not even 1 year, guys, because with the pandemic, they were going every 6 months. They were changing the rent rates and permitting landlords to adjust their rent rates every 6 months during the pandemic. So I adjusted my rents in June of 2022. And from June of 2022 to now January of 2023, the new FMRs that came out averaged an increase of 14% increase in 6 months, guys. FMRs are fantastic. FMRs, though, are a depiction of the 40th percentile of a home. Now, that in itself is a problem that I see with Section 8 and the Housing Choice Voucher Program in general, because they only are targeting the 40th percentile and below of homes. So if that makes sense to listeners, anything above the 40th percentile in any region is pretty much off market for Section 8 housing, which that in itself is a problem. But either way, I target the 40th percentile because that's what the government targets. So we're talking 14% hike in 6 months, and my take home increased by 30%.
And these are real numbers, guys. How often do you guys think about getting a 6-figure job from just spending 3 hours a month managing your properties? And you don't have to make the argument, like Mike said, like people forget about the simple things where people are going to fight tooth and nail with you on every $50 or $25 increase. In Section 8, you are not passing that on to the tenant.
No.
So that's a great another advantage of investing in affordable housing, particularly in Section 8 for the voucher holders there. I mean, Mike, we have to ask, like, hey, what are some horror stories? Have you had any bad experiences investing in affordable housing? Like, we if there is, like, we should definitely know about it, because what's so important about this podcast, and I've told you this offline, is when bad things happen, we want to hear about those stories so we can hear how other people dealt with it, so that we can actually know what to do. When you remove that fear, it gets more people involved in investing in affordable housing. So just curious, like, did you have any bad stories either with a tenant or also with your HOA? Who knows? Like, maybe there's a big special assessment. We'd love to kind of hear from you.
Yeah. And you're right, Kent, right? Like, my first horror story happened the first 3 months, right? That was one of my first ones. And that wasn't affordable housing. So we'll not talk about that one, and we won't talk about my executive rental horror story as well that involved the crawl space issue. And I'm like, why are you even down in the crawl space? Why do you care what's in the crawl space? That was my executive rental one. But yeah, so from affordable housing, I'll be honest, guys, like, if you screen them and you have a good application process, you shouldn't have too many horror stories, but it doesn't mean you're going to totally eliminate them. I did buy in the wrong area for the wrong reasons. And I will say, that zip code, here, anyone can look it up, 27610. It is Raleigh, North Carolina. I love Raleigh, North Carolina. The numbers were unbelievably huge for me. My return was enormous. I was getting over 50% return on cash on one of these zip codes that I invested in. And I learned quickly via gunfire, hitting my building and seeing my unit on TV in a police raid. Thankfully, it wasn't my particular unit, but of course, my tenant was scared out of her mind. One of the bullets literally hit the siding of my building, of my unit. I had a corner unit townhome that I bought. I mean, heck, I'll never forget it. It's Dilmar Court. And I got rid of it in 2016, but I bought it and the numbers were amazing. I bought it for $88,000. It's a 3-bedroom townhome. Seemed good, seemed awesome. I rented it out in no time. And quickly I learned, though, there's 16 units in that complex, and probably 15 of them had drugs being sold out of them. Mine being the 16th unit was the only one that didn't, that I was aware of. It was really bad. And I didn't know that though, because what do you see? You don't see much during the day. It all came out at nighttime. And that was something that I did not realize until my tenant moved in. And she said, Mike, there's cars coming and going all night long, starting at about 8 p.m., ending until about 4 a.m. And then suddenly 3 months into that, a gunfire happened. It hit my unit. My tenant was perfectly fine. She actually didn't even know the one of the bullets hit my unit. But the police did, right? And they're investigating. There's crime scene tape. My tenant called, like, really upset. I told her, look, do not worry. Move out. Like, don't worry about the lease. You're welcome to move out. We will abate this contract. I don't have a problem. I had some paperwork that I had to sign. I got her right out of there. And unfortunately, I gave it a second shot still because the numbers were so darn good. And I'm a younger guy at that point. I needed the money. And I ran into a very similar problem. And I ended up having to sell that unit after 13 months. And I had 2 different tenants. And it just didn't work. So there's my nightmare story. And when I sold it, I still made money on it because the numbers were that good. But it was a nightmare. It worried the heck out of me. My wife didn't want me driving there. She said, where are you going? And I took a good friend of mine, and I have a concealed carry, I'll be honest. So Dane, I'm going in there. I had an LC9, and I had one in the chamber. I mean, it was scary. It was scary. And I got confronted because a bee was out front. I'm like, damn it, I got to get into this unit. And there's these 2 carpenter bees. I can remember this. And the guy's like, yo, homie, you all good? And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. And I'm like trying to get these bees out. And I just like walked through. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? But I can remember my heart rate up, and I can remember my wife not happy with me going there. And I had to get out of there. So that is a nightmare, guys. It's one of those things like, and I always live by, don't buy if you don't feel comfortable. I have 2 daughters, 2 young kids. So I look at it like, if you don't feel comfortable putting your daughter in the complex, probably don't buy it. Because guys and listeners, like, you're just trying to buy a few units to change your lifestyle. Don't buy just because of the numbers. And that was something where I started learning about, like, single family homes. It's like, of course, the numbers are pretty good on the surface, but after 3 or 4 years of owning it, you're going to find all those things, not just on the outside, but on the inside too, that exist, that just don't happen with condos and townhomes as well. But there's my nightmare there, Ken. And that was a nightmare.
I could talk all day, and Kent has a little baby girl. I could talk all day about how girls change as guys, the way you see the world.
It does.
But yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, I always tell people I won't buy a property. I mean, I'll buy it if it's not great, but then by the time it's done being renovated, I say this all the time. I want to be able to live there. Would I live there? Yes. Okay. Then this is good to go. But I like that even better. Bringing up
well,
dog.
I go a step further because I've lived in some bad places personally. So like where I came from, what we didn't grow up with money. My house was 975 square foot ranch, of which probably 300 of those square feet were the basement. I don't know how they counted this place as that big, but it was safe. I'm from Augusta, Maine. But then when I moved and I was in college, I ended up buying, and we had to live where it was cheaper, man. We didn't have money. I didn't have, parents giving me money or anything, man. We were nickel and diamond. So I don't say, hey, if I'll buy if I'll live in it, because I'll live in some really weird places, man.
Yeah, the other thing I've learned from my daughter and my wife now, I see it. I'm like, men are disgusting. We'll literally live anywhere. We'll eat anything. Like, so that's a good point. That's a great point. Well, you've referenced it a couple of times, and honest to God, like, I've enjoyed every single second of this. You're obviously great at what you do. I love your systems. I love your knowledge. How do other people learn? Your systems, how do they pick your brain? I know you have an ebook and other things, but like, let's get that out there, and I'm, mark me down as a subscriber or whatever,
awesome.
Whatever the cost may be. I'll expense it to Kent. How's that?
Yeah, well, great news, great question too. So section8secrets.com, you can go to that. It's really easy to sign up for it. And what it is, it's a platform. There's a e-course, as you mentioned. There's it's like an ebook too. There's a PDF file book that I had created, and it basically hits on like a lot of the stuff we're talking about, of course, but it's like, what is Section 8? So for those people that don't even really aren't familiar with Section 8, there's a little bit of history in there. It's how do you select properties? So I do a deep dive analysis similar to what we talked about with single families and condos and townhomes. And it's up to you guys too, because of course, single families work. They definitely work. So you could do that, for sure. How to obtain financing is in there. What's the tenant application process? I created a Google Doc form, guys. It's form fields where it'll spit out in an email, because here's one thing that listeners should be aware of too. You will not have any problem finding a tenant. I promise you that. Within 24 hours, I typically, after I list my units, which I do go Section 8, I do Craigslist, but I also have contacts within the PHAs, the public housing authorities, that when they know one of my units is up and ready, they love to hear that. They're like, here's a few tenants. And I send them a link. It's a free Google form that my applicants fill out. And within that application, though, there's a point system. They're form fields. And I value specific things, and it's in the training as well. But there's certain things that I have high value of, and there's reasons for it, which is in the training. But it hits on all that stuff. It hits on property management. Should you hire a property manager or should you do it yourself? I'm a huge advocate, guys, especially for listeners that are just trying to get involved. Try it out first, guys. Try to property manage yourself, even though there's plenty of reasons why you could property manage. But there's a couple things why. Now, I'm curious on Dane being an investor, like how he's found his experience with property management, because mine, for those that don't know, Section 8 really well and government housing and how that works, property managers typically say yes to anything. I've learned this. I've tried them out. They don't all work. They don't all know. And there are nuances to understanding how to manage government housing properties. And yes, there is a difference, right? And I try to tell them that. And they're like, and then I have to get rid of them. I'm like, dude, no, you're killing me, man. Like, no, I can't do it this way. And we failed the inspections or something like that. So I've dabbled in it, and I've always managed it on my own, though, because it just didn't work out. Now, guys, you could find somebody good, maybe so. But Dane, I am actually curious. So I will stop there. Like, have you had really good success? Like, kudos, like great for you if you have. I hope you have. But I ran into some trouble there.
Yeah, no, that's why Kent was laughing too, I think, because we literally, before I left for the Caribbean, just changed, and I'm hoping that this is a fix. It's now the largest property management group in the state of Ohio for affordable housing. I was I was overwhelmed with their knowledge base, their connections. But this is our third or fourth property management group in 4 years, and there's a variety of reasons why. Some of them are great with Section 8. They know that, but they're too small. They're a mom and pop shop, and they can't handle 100. We have 168 units, even though they're all within 5 minutes. They didn't have the systems, and then some. We went with a larger company before them, and it was just a nightmare across the board. I've interviewed.
Wow. Yeah.
Before we went with this large group, I interviewed 2 or 3 other property management groups that were highly recommended. I love their systems. Either they didn't want to mess with Section 8 affordable housing, or they wouldn't go into these certain neighborhoods that we are in and are improving. They want the easy, A class, B class, out in the country, secondary or tertiary market where it's more simplistic. So we've talked about going vertical. We just didn't have the bandwidth between Jared and I, both working, and so.
Yeah. So what I found, Dane, and just on that point, so I'm sorry, right? Four in 4 years, 4 property management companies in 4 years. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of cost. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of interviewing. That's a lot of, ambiguity, not knowing, anxiety, losing sleep. I can only imagine. And because I went through it on a very smaller scale, and I was just like, you guys know you're out of here. Like, I had to fire one of them after 3 months. I'm like, this is crazy. No, you're not helping my tenant. And their up fees were insane. There's a maintenance charge. There's all this stuff. I do think, Dane, at some point, you strongly consider in-house property management. You become you have your own proprietary ways of doing things, and it becomes an in-house thing because you're big enough almost now. But maybe that new company, that's awesome that's what they manage, because there's so many nuances and there's so many understandings of how to pick an applicant, how to talk to these applicants, how to treat them, and how to get the most out of your units, and what I would call maybe asset management as well as tenant management. They're all in the same from a property management perspective. They should be doing that, right? I can only imagine though, you guys probably have a property manager, but you got to spend 80% of your time asset managing as well at the same time, which is a lot of time. There's a lot into asset management.
Like we were exhausted, and it seemed like we were doing everything but collecting the damn rents, and that wasn't even getting done, well enough. So we'll see how this goes. Yeah, there's also the legality. There's so many little nuances or things that you can't do or can't say or you have to do. And Jared and I just aren't there. We don't know all the nooks and crannies and ins and outs yet. And I'm sure we'll revisit it. We want to get to close to 300 units by the end of this year or early next year. And so this is a group that will be able to grow with us. But maybe eventually we do bring it in house. We want to work smarter and not harder. And the best thing about my current company that I'm selling are the people. The worst part about my current company that we're selling are the people, because there's benefits, there's payroll, there's all of that. And I don't want to get too far into that tangent.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. But so back on the, what's offered in the training and stuff. So I hit on that. I hit on property management versus self-management. What are the pros and the cons? What are the things to look for to the listeners that are just trying to get started? What are the up fees? What are the true costs of property management? How much time are you still going to spend, even though you hired a property manager and you think you're not involved? You should be involved still, guys. And I always say too, give it a shot, guys. So first time investors, give it a try. So that way you understand what you want your property manager to be doing, what the expectations are. Because if you've never owned and you've never been a landlord, it's hard to really police the property management company because you don't know what you don't know. So when you give it 6, 10, 12 months, you may realize, especially if you follow the model that that I'm fostering is, condos and townhomes, there's not a whole lot of property management involved. And I do stuff up front before I'm buying my unit. If I'm going to a new area, I'm searching for electricians, I'm searching for plumbers, I'm searching for general maintenance. Those 3 guys you're going to need, I get them ahead of time before I even own the unit even. And now I have them ready, and I get 2 or 3, and I advocate for that. And I talk about how you rate them and what you do and what you screen and how you screen them. And then I even hit on like LLCs because, do you want an LLC? What are umbrella policies? And then I just hit on the overall financial measures of real estate investing. What is compounding? How do you make a personal budget? That's one of the first, like, to get started, guys, look at your personal budget. That's probably the best and first thing. And see how much of your money are you eating? Meaning how much going out, how much of these little things that you could change to come up with that down payment. And then I do talk about down payment. I do talk about, managing that. How do you get your finances in together? And how much money do you really need to buy your first unit? And what is alternative financing? And what are other ways to get you started? I'm just a small player. I don't try to pose as somebody huge. I could probably scale at volume pretty quick. I just choose to have a fun lifestyle. I got kids. I got a job. I enjoy life. And I'm not overwhelmed. And that's me in a nutshell.
I love that, Mike. And it sounds like there's so much value in your training. Like what does this cost the listener? Like if they want to sign up for something like this?
Any listener can get it for free, 100% free by putting in the promo code KENT. But typically, guys, I'll let you know it's $300. We have a community. So it consists of a good amount, right? So first off, you get that Section 8 guide that I talked about. You get the PDF. You get the e-course. You get a 15-chapter, 40 e-lesson e-course in there, which also has a lot of video. So it's not all just you reading. I have about 20-plus different videos of me going through some scenarios and explaining some things. We talk about bonus material in there that's not in the training, compounding real estate stuff, alternative financing options. I go through all that. There's also the 10 different templates that are part of my training as well. So in there, I give you access to all my templates that I've refined over the course of 15, 17 plus years. Probably haven't been using the templates that long. I wish if I had, I'd probably not even be on this podcast. I'd probably be on some yacht. But the templates are super, super helpful to many people. I've given it to my friends. They were just Google Docs. And really, guys, too, I should mention, too, to listeners, too, like this all started for me just getting tired of repeating my story. I host a poker game every month. I got one going on tomorrow night. And when I do that, I find myself repeating, like, this is what Section 8 is, guys. Stop calling me a slumlord. Stop with all the stigmas. You're incorrect. I literally love my tenants. When I go to Maine, I go and visit them. I literally make it a point. I go and stop. I don't couple of years. I don't even see my units, some of them for 8-10 years, but I do talk to my tenants on a regular basis for sure. You get access to the
Mike,
forecaster from the analyzer tool. Yeah, what's up, Ken?
Yeah, Mike, this is so cool. I did not know you were going to come on here and offer it for free. So for all the listeners out there, I've checked this out myself. The information is legitimate. Like, this is very, very great, basic foundational knowledge that you can just go through yourself, learn it, master it, and then really decide how you want to invest in the spectrum of affordable housing. Like, you can like, after today, I'm convinced I want to invest with Mike after hearing about his condo stories. I want that condo unit across from his 3 units. Like, there is a mathematical support for this model. So like, you gotta look into every single option, see what works for you, and then take action. Please, you have a free tool resources now because of the generosity from someone like Mike. And Mike, this is like, I think you teed me up perfectly for this question, because I think we need more people like you to solve this. But why do you think affordable housing, or the lack of supply of affordable housing, is like so hard to solve for? And if you think there's like 1 or 2 priorities that this generation should focus on to make a dent in it, like, what would they be? I would love to kind of hear your opinion on this.
Yeah, good question, Ken. And yeah, again, guys, so it's section8secrets.com, and just use the promo code KENT for full free access to the entire e-course. You can get personal coaching one-on-one. That comes at a cost, $3,600 for a year, but you get 12 personal one-on-one. You know, what I do is I take them through the entire deal process. They could figure out how you want to use your 12 sessions. I'm happy to, use them all in 12 days. I'm happy to use them in 12 months or in 12 years. It doesn't matter. I'm happy to be there, though, and accessible. And we have a community on here too, guys. So we have people sharing their stories. We do police it, and we just make sure that it's people that are part of our investing platform. And it is really fun to see these ideas going out there and everybody sharing that stuff. But yeah, Ken, on your question, I mean, I hate to do it, but I got to blame the government, man. I gotta say the Housing Choice Voucher Program has a pretty big rap in the eyes of investors. And it's probably because there's a lack of understanding of what it really is, and accessibility on their websites. They're clunky. It's archaic. When you go to HUD.gov, even that in itself, you're thinking fax machines, right? And stuff. So they don't do a great job there. And then they can improve the overall, once as a new investor. And I dealt with that because my partner of Section 8 Secrets, Albert Cho, is somebody that he probably would never have done this if it wasn't for me telling him, literally holding his hand through it. The inspection process itself is so nerve-wracking because you also can't even get a tenant to sign a lease until your unit passes an inspection. And that could take up to 30 days. So you're sitting there like twiddling your thumbs. You're like, I don't even know what to expect here. What are they talking about? You can't come out for 3 weeks? Like, how does this work? But when you know the program and you know what to anticipate, and they're going out and the home quality standards like our platform does, then okay. But not many people know that because there's not platforms that the government's offering for free. So it's suddenly like it's super hard to find information. So I'd say they can make the experience of hunting and understanding what Housing Choice Voucher investing is all about, because it's more geared when you go to these sites. It's more geared for how do I apply? How do I get my housing? How do utilities work? What's the waiting line, which, on average, guys, the national average waiting line is like 6.5 years. So that's how backlogged they are and short they are of landlords and investors, which is why I want to offer this platform for free to help that out. So overall, yeah, it's just the websites in the full advertising. And my other point that I would say, one other critical one, is stop with the 40 percentile. Like I said earlier, stop only targeting. And what I mean by that is the government has elected to choose that only the 40th percentile and below of any given neighborhood, any given county, those are suitable for Housing Choice Voucher holders. But why? Why is it the 40th percentile? What mathematical government equation came up with that? And can it not change after, 60 years? Is it time to up that? And I think the answer is yes. Should we go to 50%? Does that sound like a big number? I don't think so. It's 10% more. But are you kidding me with how many more houses that might open up to? And why do I say that? Because that'll make the numbers that much more appealing to investors. So, Mr. Government, if you're listening, 50 percentile and below, we'll go with that. We'll go even higher. Maybe I should ask for 70 and settle at 50, but that would be what I'd say, Ken. We need to go up more on the percentiles of homes and neighborhoods that they're targeted and deemed appropriate. Why isn't it 50%? Why? I get pretty passionate about this because these are good people. Why can't they live in the 50th percentile of a home? Why does it have to be 40? And why does that have to stay the way it has for 68 years? That seems silly to me. I haven't seen that number change in the 16 years that I've been in Section 8 housing. It has remained at the 40th percentile. Up that because it ups the number of homes that are available to these dire need people. And what are we doing as investors? We're trying to enrich our lives, but it's also we enrich their lives by giving them a 50th percentile home in a neighborhood. So I am pretty passionate about it because I know the shortage is brutal. And I've talked to these tenants. They're in tears. They're desperate. They're on the streets. They're in shelters. They're couch surfing. They're in basements. These are the people that I've spoke with, and they need the help. So we should change the way the government is policing it and advertising it. And, and then my last point is also incentivizing. Incentivize the landlords. One thing Maine Housing does is they incentivize me for every new unit I put in the program. It's not a big number. It's $750, but that covers my appraisal costs, right? They give me $750 for every new unit, but they could go above that. You can go way beyond that. You have a lot of housing funding for it. So incentivize at a greater scale, because down here in Raleigh, North Carolina, the wait list is 9 years. What's my incentive? Zero. I get zero incentive for putting a unit into the program. Incentivize government, please. Give the reason for the novice investor to really say, let me stop in my tracks. Let me understand what is investing in Section 8 housing. Why might I do that? Give a little bit of sizzle, just a tiny bit, government. So yeah, there it is, Kent. I got one on my rant.
I love it. I love it. We had a meltdown here in Columbus. We worked hand in hand with Section 8 here. Loved it. Great relationship. They loved us, vice versa. I've talked about it ad nauseum on other episodes. But then they outsourced everything. They got rid of 70 or 80 employees. And Section 8 here in town was the only governmental agency. And I'm in healthcare. I deal with Medicare, Medicaid, like all day, every day. And Section 8 here was the only governmental agency that I've ever been associated with that I walked away on the first day very impressed. Like,
nice.
In Columbus, they did it right. They wanted you, phenomenal. But then they got rid of 70 or 80 people and outsourced it. And it's not weeks, it's months. We still have a unit that's like 10 months out. We're still waiting on an inspection. There are people sleeping inside the Section 8 offices, just like you said. It went from, a great organization that didn't have enough inventory to just it's insanity right now. It's
I mean, it's pretty sad, right? And guys, and to the listeners too, understand though, you have a partner, you have a landlord liaison, they have case managers, so it isn't that bad. Once you get involved, guys, it's really great. But it's the government not doing the job to advertise this, to know it's available, and publicize it and incentivize it effectively, and to also grow it at scale. Like, stop with the 40%, go to 50%. But yeah, Dane, that's crazy, right? Like, you're one mass firing, one tranche firing away from it. I love Maine Housing as well, so I hope that doesn't happen to them. The Maine Housing staff there is unbelievable. I'm actually going up. I'm going to speak at their annual seminar that they have for investors. There are little pockets of things that they do. I can't remember what they call this, but they basically are a team of people that try to promote more investors getting involved. So they have an annual meeting in October that they've invited me to speak at, because I did share this platform with them. They were like, "This is great. We love this." They had to bless it before I can advertise for it up there in Maine on some of the Maine Housing advertising sites. But yeah, it is too bad, because once you get in the program, you will see, to the listeners, to the investors, like, it is awesome, guys, because you are getting top dollar in rents. Because if you buy anyway at the 40 percentile, it works. Just target the 40 percentile. The numbers work just fine. The rents are super competitive, and you will never have a problem upping your rents, because the government is sending me, on average, guys, historically, in 16 and a half years, This is true, guys. I love numbers. 18.6% or 81.6% of all my rent dollars collected came from the government. 81.6% of all rents collected came from the government in my 16 years as an investor. I only get less than 19% come from my tenants. That's not hard to sleep at night.
And I'm sure that helps you sleep at night. And they all pay. So this is it. Mike, I just want to thank you for coming onto the podcast, because without people like you, I personally would have never had a stable home kind of growing up. So thank you so much for investing in affordable housing. Thank you for being like that glimmer of light and hope when we hear about all these problems with affordable housing. It's so amazing to hear that there are people like you and your partner that are willing to put resources like this available to the world for free. So guys, go to section8secrets.com, use the promo code KENT, and get these resources, get access to this education, and start taking action, because we need way more people attacking this problem. We need the government to create more incentives. We need the process to be more simple, but it also requires us to educate ourselves so that we collectively as a group can overcome all these challenges that, you know, there are stigmas against Section 8 tenants already. Like, there's so many things that we have to overcome, and we just need way more people involved in this and such a large community to make a true impact on this. So that's the reason why we started this podcast. And Mike, Dana and I are so happy that you came onto the podcast today. It's been a blessing. This has been a wonderful conversation. We really hope that maybe we'll partner with you on a deal, man. And then we can bring this onto the podcast and we talk about it like a case study so people can follow along every single step of the process. And that would be so cool. That would be so cool. So
that'd be really cool, guys. Yeah, you could try using the platform to take you through and buy a unit and just, that'd be really cool as a case study. Like, use the analyzer, like pinpoint anywhere in the United States. That's what's really cool about the analyzer tool. So I have a VP of operations who's a software engineer background. You know, he comes from technology, that he's also on my team and part owner. And he built this analyzer tool based on what I told him to be doing, because, you know, through the course of what I need to see in value. And we would love to see that happen. Like, you could buy anywhere and it'll show you based on rent to value ratios, like where the numbers work. And, you know, of course, we want to look at crime rate, which we feed that in, insurance rate, things like that. That's all in the analyzer though, man. That would be really cool to see. I have yet to, you know, and we just launched, guys. So to be honest, you know, full disclosure here, January 1, we just launched. So our community is kind of small right now. And, you know, our true authority is pretty low because I'm not big on social media. My free time is spent with my family and, you know, maybe golfing and playing some cards. But it would be really cool, like, as a case study for sure. That'd be awesome.
No, this has been fun, man. All right, Mike, thank you so much for coming on. We're going to wrap this up, but we can't wait to have you back on the show eventually at some point, man. So thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Ken, thank you. Dane, nice meeting you.